Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place in the world during the previous 24 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Ukraine, because during the previous night the Russians carried out another massive combined missile and drone attack through the entire territory of Ukraine with the purpose to destroy or to damage significantly the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. After Ukraine we will discuss the situation in the Middle East, of course. So let's continue and let's take a look at the map that was published this morning by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see the approximate roads of Russian missiles that were attacking the territory of Ukraine, not just missiles of course, and drones as well. So as you can see, the Russians were attacking significantly the city of Kiev. As for the city of Kiev, the Russians were using mainly Iskander missiles and several drones. The Russians were attacking the southwestern parts of Ukraine, the southwestern parts of the Vinnytsia Oblast. As you can see, the Russians used hundreds of drones to attack this territory and lots of caliber missiles for the same purposes. And the Russians attacked a very interesting object to the northwest of the city of Kiev with several hypersonic Zircon missiles. And of course, the Russians were attacking the territories along the line of combat contact, and lots of explosions were recorded on the territory of the city of Kharkiv. So the Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning reported that the Russians during the previous night used 509 air assets to attack the territory of Ukraine. And of course, the Russians used the combination of drones and missiles. The Russians used more than 400 drones and more than 2 dozens of missiles. So that was a very powerful attack, but we have lots of interesting details about this attack. According to information we have, the Russians attacked the territory of Ukraine after 10 days of break. The previous attack took place on the 26th of February of 2026, so almost at the end of February of 2026, and this is the map of the previous attack. As for the previous attack, the Russians were mainly attacking the city of Kiev, so during the previous night they were attacking the city of Kiev as well, so no changes as you can see, and the Russians attacked the line between the Kiev substation 750 and Vinnytsia substation 750. So during the previous attack, the Russians were trying to destroy this line. So this line, and they were trying to cut the substation in the area of the city of Kiev and the substation around the city of Vinnytsia. So the Russians were trying to cut the substation with the purpose to split the western, to cut the Ukraine into the western energy system and the eastern energy system. But according to information we have, during the previous attack, the Ukrainians managed to bring down almost everything. So the previous attack, the Russians haven't managed to achieve their goals. And today, during the 6th, between the 6th and the 7th of February of 2026, the Russians attacked once again the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. And according to this map, the Russians were trying to cut the southern energy lines. So according to updates, according to independent sources, the Russians were attacking this territory. So the Russians were trying to destroy energy infrastructure, energy lines between the Ladizhin power station and, let's call it like, the border of Moldova. So the Russians used lots of caliber missiles in this area. And this morning we received lots of updates. So, for example, according to information we have, the Russians attacked the Dniester pumpered storage power station with 14 calibers missiles. So this power station was attacked by Russians, and later we received this picture of fire anomalies, and as you can see, as a result of this attack, most likely the Russians managed to deal significant damage to this power station. At the same time, it is a very interesting and surprise situation to me that the Russians didn't attack this substation 750 substation that is located a bit further to the north. Maybe the Russians were planning to attack this substation, but maybe the Ukrainians managed to bring down missiles that were flying in this direction. And the Russians attacked also the Ladizhin power station. The sources reported that the Russians used 5 caliber missiles. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that the Russians were trying to cut the import of electricity from Romania and from Moldova. So the Russians were, by destroying these lines, the Russians were trying to cut Ukraine from the Romanian and Moldovan energy infrastructure. I would like to remind you that several days ago and during the previous days, the Hungarians and the Slovakians threatened Ukraine if they don't let's say, reopen the Druzhba pipeline, then these two European states would cut energy supply through the US and Ukrainian 750 substation, and they will cut export to Ukraine with electricity. And we believe that, of course, the Ukrainians most likely will not resume oil supply to the European countries through the Druzhba pipeline. So that is why the Ukrainians did everything they can with the purpose to improve this line between Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine itself, with the purpose to increase energy import to the territory of Ukraine using this line if everything goes bad with Slovakia and Hungary. And of course, the Russians understood everything. The Russians see the situation, so that is why during the previous night they damaged this line significantly with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to shift their electricity import from Slovakia and Hungary towards Romania and Moldova. So this is a very important situation, which means that the Russians continue pressuring Ukraine with the purpose to force them to reopen the Druzhba pipeline. But I would like to remind you that the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, yesterday stated that he doesn't want to reopen Druzhba pipeline. To be honest, I wouldn't restore it. That's my opinion. I said this to European leaders and to the leadership of the European Union because this is Russian oil. There are some principles that have no price. They are killing us, and we should supply oil to Orban because he, poor thing, cannot win elections without this oil. So this is the situation. Furthermore, the sources reported that the Russians were attacking also different railway stations and different substations along this area. For example, the sources reported that the Russians most likely attacked this substation, which is located along the railways between the western parts of Ukraine and the central part of Ukraine. So the Russians, according to Ukrainians, intensified their attacks on the Ukraine's logistics, and this is one of the strikes on this in this area. Another important attack took place in the northern parts of Ukraine, in the area of the city by the name of Khorostin. We have just a picture from this area, and here we can see that this is another region where the Russians were attacking the lines, substations, and the logistics at the same place and at the same time. So as you can see here, we have lots of energy lines between that connects the central part of Russia with the eastern and the western parts, or the central part of Ukraine with the eastern and the western parts of Ukraine. So it seems that the Russians were trying to cut this line as well. And of course, the Russians most likely were trying to cut railways that go from the western part of Ukraine, basically from the territory of the European Union, in the direction of the city of Kiev. So once again, the Russians use 509 missiles and drones altogether, but as of the morning of the 7th of March, it is very difficult to understand whether this attack was successful or not. We have lots of fire anomalies, we have lots of pictures that show that what exactly the Russians were attacking, but we don't know for sure whether this attack was successful or not. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contact. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates. According to information we have, the Russians also attacked the city of Odessa overnight. Lots of explosions were destroyed, and we have fire anomalies. The sources are saying that the Russians hit the energy and the port infrastructure, especially these facilities, and as you can see, there was a very big fire. Now let's move to the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of updates from this area, and the most important is that we have an update that confirms additional progress on the ground of Russians in the western direction towards the village of Gulyai-Polskaya. This video was published by pro-Russian sources, and here we can see how Russians were attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area. It seems that the Russians are trying to break through Ukraine's defense and get as close as possible to the city of Gulyai-Polskaya, but as of now, the Russians are trying to destroy and trying to capture as many as possible strongholds on this way. Another important video was published from the northern flank of the Zaporozhye direction. This is the video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we might see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians. I would like to remind you that yesterday this territory was colored by different mappers as the territories under complete control of the armed forces of Ukraine, but this morning we start receiving updates that there are still Russian positions, and it's better to say that the Ukrainians managed to infiltrate further to the south of the settlement of Danilovka, but not to capture the settlement completely. As for the Dnipropetrovsk direction, according to updates we're receiving, the Russians intensifying their offensive operation in this area. During the previous several days, lots of changes were recorded in this area. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 2nd of March of 2026, and the Russians began moving in the northwestern direction between the settlements of Novopodgorodny, Sergeyevka and Grishina. And these are the changes on the ground. First, the Russians improved their positions in the area of the village of Grishina. Then the Russians managed to improve their positions, and this improvement was confirmed also by a geolocation. Later, the Russians managed to improve their positions and basically to capture the entire settlement of Grishina, and this information was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources. As of now, we are just waiting for the same confirmation by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and by the beginning of the 7th of March, as you can see, the Russians improved their position significantly in the area of the village of Novopodgorodnya. This information was confirmed by pro-Russian sources, and the Russians managed to almost answer the southeastern part of the settlement of Sergeyevka. So it seems that the Russians are about to break through Ukraine's defense in this area, which opens the Russians an operation, the Dnipropetrovsk operational space, and from these positions the Russians most likely will continue offensive operation further in the northwestern direction with the purpose to outflank Ukraine's positions around the settlement of Mizhova and then to attack the Ukrainians from behind and to take this territory in pincers or to encircle this. As for the Slaviansk-Konstantinovka direction, during the previous night we haven't received almost anything, and the same thing concerns the northern directions. The only interesting thing we have already discussed yesterday, if you remember, the Russians launched a very powerful offensive operation along the border to the east of the settlement of Sumy. Lots of territories were taken by Russians. We have huge infiltration from the Russian side. The Russians answer, as we can see, the village of Stepok. The Russians continue advancing in the direction of the settlement of Novodmitrievka. We believe that in coming hours we will receive additional updates, and maybe the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will also confirm this information. If you remember, just yesterday we discussed that that's a very interesting intelligence activities were recorded from the Russian side in this area, and lots of sources were guessing what exactly the Russians were planning to do. And it seems that now we understand what the Russians are planning. They're planning to attack the city of Sumy from the southeast. Now let's move to the Middle East. During the previous 24 hours, we also received lots of very important updates, and probably the most important thing is that the United States of America decided to redeploy additional assets in this region. We're talking about a third aircraft strike group. So this is a very important piece of news. Furthermore, we start receiving reports from the Chinese intelligence services and satellite picture that the company Mither Vision reportedly captured the entry of the U.S. Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier group of the U.S. Navy into Suez Canal, which means that most likely the United States of America will try to improve and reinforce their forces and their fleets to the south of Iran, somewhere in the area of the Arabian Sea. This aircraft carrier group will join Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier group, and together they will continue bombing and attacking the southeastern part of Iran with the purpose probably to support possible ground operation that might take place in coming days or maybe weeks. Another important thing that we received, according to information we have from the United States of America, first of all, Trump has privately shown serious interest in deploying a small number of U.S. ground forces troops to Iran. The idea is not a large invasion, but a limited force for specific missions such as securing nuclear materials or conducting special operations. But most likely, the special forces of the United States of America could be used as the main forces with different forces, in combination with forces from Kurds or probably Azerbaijanis. Together, the US forces will control them and stay basically behind to control the process, while the forces of Kurds or forces of the southeastern ethnic group of Iran, we discussed the situation yesterday, the forces like Baloch would be in the first line of attacks. Maybe something like this is being prepared from the United States of America. America. Another important thing, today we received the report who exactly most likely will be a major group from the United States. The US Army abruptly cancelled the major training exercises for the 82nd Airborne Division's headquarters, fueling speculations that the Rapid Response Unit could deploy to the Middle East as the US conflict with Iran expands. So most likely 82nd Airborne Divisions is going to be the first group of the United States of America who probably would be deployed in this region. Another important thing is that the third aircraft carrier US Bush will be deployed to the Middle East. Very difficult to say when exactly this aircraft carrier group will arrive in this area, but obviously within the next 2, 3 or 4 weeks, so there are still lots of time before this group arrives. At the same time, we continue receiving updates about the consequences of first 7-8 days of the clashes in the Middle East, and today different sources summarized the losses of the coalition. According to information we have, the USA has sustained major losses in the current conflict with Iran. Some of them are as follows: 5 F-15s Strike Eagle fighter jets, 3 Patriot air defense systems, 2 Israeli Hermes 900 surveillance drones, and several radars: INFPS 132 early warning radar with an estimated tracking range of 5,000 km, 6 NTPY radars with estimated tracking range of 3,000 km belonging to THAAD and Patriot missile defense systems, and 2 THAAD systems destroyed come under the radars destroyed, since the radars were the components which were destroyed. So this is the situation. As you can see, the losses are very high just during the first 7-8 days of the conflict, and most likely the losses will continue. At the same time, the Iranians also continue suffering losses. The United States of America are attacking the territories and positions along the Persian Gulf, along the Strait of Hormuz. During the previous 24 hours, we received additional video where we can see the footage of Iran's largest Navy vessel Makran sinking in the Strait of Hormuz after being targeted by the United States of America. So 2 days ago, the ship was completely destroyed. Furthermore, during the previous nights, the United States of America and the coalition continued destroying the ballistic launching systems through the entire territory of Iran, and obviously we are entering the war of attrition period of time, because very difficult even to imagine what is going to happen in this area within the next 2 or 3 months, because the territory and this entire conflict would be significantly changed. Because this is not just a conflict between the coalition and the Iranians. Today we continue receiving reports that Iran is supported by the Russian Federation and by China. The US has intelligence about China's support for Iran. American intelligence has data that China may provide Iran with financial assets as well as spare parts and components for missiles. According to the TV channel, Beijing remains one of the largest buyers of Iranian oil and seriously dependent on these supplies. Furthermore, I would like to point to your attention that if we increase the number of updates since the beginning of the conflict, you will see that most of the attacks took place mainly in the western and the central and in the northern parts of Iran. As you can see, there is a very huge territory of Iran. We're talking about its eastern and the northeastern part that weren't damaged as a result of the conflict. So we're talking about these territories, and the sources are saying that the coalition didn't attack these territories due to the fact that this territory was significantly increased with electronic warfare equipment from the Russian side and from China. So nobody knows for sure what exactly is happening in this area. Nobody knows for sure how the Chinese are supporting this region with parts, spare parts, and so on. What kind of activities the Russians are doing here. So, but one thing is clear, but that due to the fact that this territory is not under the fire of the coalition, this means that this territory was well secured since June and May of 2025, which means that the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians may build here a lot of things, military production facilities, storages, warehouse, and so on. And furthermore, there are most likely some plans that the Iranians use to produce drones and missiles with the purpose to attack the territory of coalition in the future. So this is the situation in this area, and we see that there are still lots of job for the coalition before the situation would be broken completely in the coalition favor. But at the same time, we receive lots of updates about very critical and dangerous situation in the global energy market. According to information we have, the US fleet will escort ships in the Strait of Hormuz as soon as possible, and we expect to see a decrease in prices within weeks, not months. So this is the statement of the US authorities. Because the thing is that global oil and gas prices are climbing as the energy crisis deepens amid the Iran war. Gulf energy experts warn that oil could surpass the 100 per barrel mark as early as next week. At the same time, different experts from, for example, the United Arab Emirates are saying that the prices for oil may increase to $150 per barrel. Another important thing is not just about oil, but about food. There is only 10 days worth of fresh produce left in Dubai. So this is a very important thing because the United States of America need to start securing the Strait of Hormuz within the next 10 days, because if it doesn't happen, then fresh foods, so there will be no fresh produce and food left in Dubai, which can lead to the significant humanitarian crisis in this area and the complete exodus of the entire population from this area in the western direction towards the state of Saudi Arabia. But the problem is that Saudi Arabia will not be able to handle with this number of people, because the problem with food is also present on the territory of the state as well. So a lot of bad things might happen during to this situation. But as of now, the United States of America is not ready to secure the Strait of Hormuz, because the Iranians continue attacking vessels in this area. And during the previous 24 hours, we received several reports that the Iranians continued attacking vessels and tankers who were trying to break through the blockade. And the sources are saying that since the beginning of the conflict, at least 13 ships and vessels or tankers were attacked, and this is a very big number. And of course, these attacks will continue if tankers will try to break through the Strait of Hormuz. Another important statement were made by the Iranians today. They stated that they will not attack the territories of Middle East states in the case if the United States of America and the coalition will not attack from these territories, which means that this is something like an ultimatum, and this is something like the request from the Iranian side to the Middle East states to make a decision. Either they will force the bases and the forces of the United States of America leave their territories, otherwise the Iranians will continue attacking these territories with missiles and drones, and the Iranians will continue blockade. So this is a very interesting situation, because now the states of the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait are forced to make a decision, either to force the forces of the United States of America to leave this area, or to accept the reality and continue suffering huge losses when talking about infrastructure, oil infrastructure, food crisis, and so on. Very interesting situation, because it's not just about not making attacks on the territory of Iran from this territory. Most likely, the Iranians are trying to force these states and to force the Americans in the coalition not to use and important infrastructure like radars, bases, warehouses, airfields, and so on. By the way, during the previous 24 hours, we received additional videos of destructions. For example, in this satellite image, we can see consequences of another Iranian missile and drone strike on the American base Arif Jan in Kuwait. 6 satellite communication stations, SATCOM, and some buildings were completely destroyed. As you can see, these are the changes. And we are talking about these objects of critical infrastructure, military infrastructure of the coalition. At the same time, we continue receiving updates that something is brewing in the northwestern parts of Iran. The Iranians continue attacking positions and bases of the coalition in this area. The United States of America continue redeploying additional forces and additional cargoes and equipment in this area. Furthermore, we have reports that the Reuters citing informed sources, Kurdish groups aim to seize control of border towns, including Ashnavay and Piranshar. So we are talking about the most northwestern parts of Iran, and most likely this operation may start in coming days, maybe even hours. Furthermore, the Azerbaijani authorities continue political escalation with And the Iranians today we received a report that Azerbaijan will attack Iran following drone attacks earlier this week, according to the Israeli assessments. Another important thing is that Azerbaijan state security says it has thwarted the Iranian plans for terrorist sabotage and intelligence gathering inside the country following a series of counterintelligence operations. So now telling the truth, I have no doubts that the Azerbaijanis are going to be a part of the ground operation in Iran, which most likely are going to start within even days, not even weeks, but probably at the same time with the third aircraft carrier group arrives in this area. And that's it for the short video. The Military with Samurai channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.